The glass doors of Westfield Academy slid open as Kai Chin stepped through, his portable oxygen concentrator humming softly at his side. The sleek device rolled behind him on small wheels, connected to the nasal prongs beneath his nose by clear tubing. He'd been out for 6 weeks. Pulmonary fibrosis didn't care about school schedules, and returning felt like entering enemy territory. "Look who finally showed up," called a voice that made Kai's stomach drop. Jackson Ridge stood near the central atrium, his varsity swim jacket draped casually over one shoulder. Around him, his teammates formed a loose semicircle. "It's the robot boy. Someone check if he needs charging." Kai kept his eyes forward, focusing on the rhythm his pulmonologist had taught him. Breathe in for 3, hold for 3, exhale for 6. His fingers tightened on the handle of his concentrator as he navigated through the morning crowd. "Hey, everybody." Sienna Park's voice rang out, phone already raised. "Time for another episode of Cyborg Chronicles." Students slowed, phones appearing in hands. Some looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. Kai had learned that lesson already. Discomfort wasn't the same as courage. Jackson stepped directly into his path. "What's wrong, Tin Man? Cat got your tongue? Or did they replace that with machinery too?" "Move," Kai said quietly. "Make me." Jackson's hand shot out, grabbing the oxygen tube. With a practiced yank, he pulled it free from the concentrator's outlet. Pain flared in Kai's nostrils as the prongs jerked loose. His chest immediately tightened, not from panic, but from the very real deprivation of supplemental oxygen his scarred lungs desperately needed. "Stop." Marcus Webb's voice boomed across the atrium. The senior linebacker pushed through the crowd, his Letterman jacket bearing a different school logo than Jackson's swimmers wore. "Back off, Ridge." But Jackson's teammates were already moving. 2 of them caught Marcus by the arms, slamming him against the trophy case with a crash that echoed through the space. "Keep recording." Sienna squealed, dancing on her toes. "This is going to break the internet." Through the growing crowd, Kai spotted Mr. Harrison, the swim coach, standing near the athletic office. Their eyes met. Harrison glanced down at his clipboard and walked away. Jackson grabbed Kai's water bottle from his backpack, uncapping it with theatrical flair. "Maybe we need to water him," he announced, appending the bottle over Kai's head. Cold water ran down his face, his neck, soaking into his button-down shirt. "Maybe that'll help his circuits grow back." "Robot. Robot. Robot." Sienna started the chant, and others joined in, some enthusiastically, others nervously, all of them participating in Kai's humiliation. Marcus struggled against the swimmers holding him. "You're pathetic, Ridge." "And you're boring," one of the swimmers replied, pressing harder. "Stay down unless you want to join the science project." Jackson moved closer to Kai, backing him against the wall. The cold tile pressed through his wet shirt. His lungs burned, each breath harder without the oxygen flow, but he refused to let tears fall. Crying only fed them. "What's wrong?" Jackson leaned in, his breath hot on Kai's face. "Nothing to say? No witty comeback?" Kai stared straight ahead, his face a mask of stone. He'd learned this defense mechanism early: show nothing, give nothing, survive. Some students shifted uncomfortably in the crowd. A few pulled out their phones, not to record, but to text nervously. Most just watched, passive consumers of cruelty. "He needs mouth-to-mouth," Sienna suggested with a cruel laugh. "Who wants to volunteer?" "Oh wait, you might catch lung disease." The burning in Kai's chest intensified. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. But he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. "Boring." Jackson finally stepped back, gesturing to his teammate. The boy tossed the disconnected oxygen tube onto the floor, where it landed in a puddle of spilled water. "Come on. The robot's no fun when he plays dead." The crowd dispersed slowly, Sienna lingering just long enough to get a final close-up of Kai's wet face before following the others. Already tapping at her phone, uploading the video with lightning speed, Marcus scrambled up the moment he was released, rushing to retrieve the oxygen tube. "Here," he said softly, trying to reconnect it to the concentrator. His hands shook with rage. "I'm so sorry, Kai." "I tried, it's okay," Kai whispered, taking the tube. His fingers trembled as he wiped it dry with his sleeve and reconnected it. He waited until the familiar hiss of oxygen flow resumed before reinserting the nasal prongs. I need to go home." He waited until everyone was gone before making his way out of the academy. Each step felt heavy, like wading through deep water. His nose had started bleeding, a common problem since his illness began, made worse by the rough removal of his nasal prongs. The walk home was a blur of sidewalk cracks and afternoon shadows. Kai counted his breaths, focused on the rhythm, refused to think about tomorrow, When he reached his house, he paused at the door, wiping carefully at his nose with his damp sleeve. The door opened before he could reach for it. His father, David Chin, stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking out the afternoon sun. His dark eyes took in everything at once, the wet clothes, the blood on Kai's sleeve, the slight angle to his nasal prongs where they'd been hastily reinserted. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them held the weight of everything that had happened, everything that would happen next. The kitchen table was set for dinner, but the meal sat untouched. Kai pushed rice around his plate, building little mountains and valleys. The bleeding had stopped, but his nose felt raw, and the nasal prongs rubbed uncomfortably against the tender skin. "You need to eat, sweetheart," Lin said softly, reaching across to touch Kai's hand. "Tomorrow's your treatment. Keep your strength up." David sat at the head of the table, his plate also untouched. His eyes hadn't left Kai since he'd come home. "What happened to your nose?" he asked finally, his voice low and measured. "Just a nosebleed," Kai mumbled, scooping up a tiny bite of rice. "They happen all the time now. This one's different." David's fork clinked as he set it down. The tubing was disturbed. "Someone pulled it." Kai shrugged, not meeting his father's eyes. "It's not a big deal." Not a big. Lin started to rise, but David placed a gentle hand on her arm. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, then went very still. "Marcus sent me something." "Dad, don't." But David was already pressing play. Sienna's voice filled the kitchen. Time for another episode of Cyborg Chronicles. The phone's small speaker made the laughter sound distant and tinny. Kai wanted to disappear into his chair as his father watched the video. His wet clothes, Jackson's taunts, Marcus being thrown against the trophy case, all of it playing out again in terrible detail. He could see the muscles in his father's jaw working, but his face remained eerily calm. Lin moved behind David to watch, her hand covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Those monsters." When the video ended, David set the phone down with precise care. He stood up and walked to the counter, returning with a legal pad and pen. His movements were measured, deliberate. "Names," he said, sitting back down. "Jackson Ridge. Swim captain, senior. The girl filming?" "Sienna Park," Kai said quietly. "She's head of the student council, junior year." David wrote in his neat block letters. "The two who attacked Marcus? Tyler Banks and Owen Marsh. Also on the swim team. Coach standing by the athletic office? Coach Harrison. He's the aquatics director." David documented each detail, times, descriptions, who laughed, who joined in, who just watched. His pen moved steadily across the paper like he was compiling an after-action report. "David," Lin said, her voice carrying a warning. "I know that look." "I'm gathering evidence," he said without looking up. "Building a case." "Don't go special forces on this," Lin insisted. "These are kids. Kids who assaulted our son." His voice remained level, but there was steel beneath the calm. "Kids who interfered with his medical equipment. Kids who filmed it for entertainment." Kai pushed his plate away, his appetite completely gone. "Can I be excused?" Both parents turned to look at him, and he saw their expressions soften, his mother's anger melting into concern, his father's tactical focus gentling. "Of course, baby," Lin said. "Do you need help with your evening medications?" "I got it." Kai stood carefully, steadying himself on the table. The lack of proper oxygen earlier had left him slightly dizzy. David watched him, his pen still poised over the pad. "We're not letting this continue, Kai." "I know." He managed a small smile. "You're probably already planning some crazy special ops mission." "Nothing crazy." The corner of David's mouth twitched. "Just thorough." Later that night, Kai lay in bed, trying to focus on his graphic novel but reading the same panel over and over. A soft knock made him look up. David stood in the doorway, still in his day clothes. "Can I come in?" Kai nodded, setting his book aside. His father crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. For a moment, he just looked at Kai, his eyes taking in his son's face like he was memorizing every detail. "I want you to understand something," he said finally. "What happened today? What's been happening? It stops now." "Dad, no, I've let this go on too long." His voice was quiet but firm. "Thinking the school would handle it. Thinking they'd protect you. That was my mistake." Kai pulled his blanket higher, feeling both embarrassed and oddly comforted. "I don't want you to get in trouble. Or make things worse." David reached out and adjusted Kai's nasal prongs with gentle fingers, his touch careful around the tender spots. "We're going to handle this," he said. "But we'll do it my way. Quiet. Strategic. Thorough. He spoke the words like a promise, and Kai felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. His father had always been the calm one, the planner, the one who could look at any situation and find the path through it. Now he saw that same focused determination directed at his problem, and for the first time in months, he felt truly safe. The next morning, Principal Okafor's office felt smaller than usual. Maybe it was David Chen's presence, the way he stood at parade rest near the window, filling the space without saying a word. Or maybe it was Victoria Ridge's nervous energy as she paced behind her son's chair, her designer heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. Officer Brennan leaned against the wall, trying to look bored. "Mrs. Ridge, you really didn't need to come down for this," he said. "When someone accuses my Jackson of assault, I absolutely need to be here." Victoria's voice dripped with indignation. Principal Okafor sat behind his desk, tugging at his collar. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, casting stripes across the scattered papers before him. "Mr. Chen," Okafor began, "I understand you have concerns about yesterday's incident." David stepped forward and placed a thick folder on the desk. "Not concerns. Evidence." He opened the folder with precise movements, laying out photographs, written statements, and time-stamped screenshots from the video. His hands moved with military efficiency, arranging everything in perfect rows. At 8:17 a.m., Jackson Ridge and 3 other students cornered my son in the main atrium. They deliberately interfered with his medical equipment, specifically his portable oxygen concentrator, which provides necessary supplemental oxygen for his pulmonary fibrosis. "Now, wait just a minute," Victoria cut in. Page 3. David tapped a crystal-clear photo showing Jackson's hand on Kai's oxygen tube, downloaded from a public social media post. Page 4 shows the resulting nasal trauma. Page 5 contains witness statements from 14 students. Officer Brennan pushed off the wall. "Look, kids, roughhouse. It's normal. Intentionally disrupting medical equipment is assault," David continued as if Brennan hadn't spoken. "The video evidence shows premeditation. They targeted him specifically, planned the attack, and recorded it for entertainment." Principal Okafor shuffled through the papers, his face growing paler. "Mr. Chen, while this behavior is certainly concerning." Page 7 details the school's legal obligations regarding student safety and medical accommodations. David's finger moved to another document. Page 8 outlines the relevant criminal statutes. Page 9 contains my son's medical documentation, including the medical necessity of continuous oxygen supplementation. Jackson sank lower in his chair. Victoria stopped pacing. "The law is very clear about interfering with medical devices," David said, his voice still measured but carrying an edge of steel. "As is the school's policy on filming and distributing videos of assaults on school grounds." "This is ridiculous," Victoria snapped. "Jackson would never intentionally hurt anyone. And that boy, David cut in, turning to face her fully, is my son. Who has a chronic lung disease. Who needs supplemental oxygen to breathe. Who your son attacked, filmed, and humiliated for fun." The room went very quiet. Even Brennan looked uncomfortable. Principal Okafor cleared his throat. "Given the thoroughness of this documentation, I believe immediate action is warranted." He straightened in his chair. 2-week suspension for all students involved. And the swim meet this Friday, the championship qualifier, will be forfeited. Forfeited? Jackson sat up straight for the first time. "You can't do that. College scouts are coming." "I absolutely can," Okafor said, some authority finally entering his voice. "And I am." "This is outrageous," Victoria hissed. "Do you know how many people depend on these meets? The scouts, the sponsors, the college recruiters should have thought about that before filming an assault," David said quietly. Victoria whirled on him. "You think you can just walk in here with your military background and intimidate everyone? This is a school matter." "No, Mrs. Ridge." David gathered his documents back into the folder with precise movements. "This is a legal matter. The school can handle the disciplinary side, or I can file criminal charges. Your choice." Officer Brennan finally pushed himself fully upright. "Now hold on. Filing charges seems excessive. Does it?" David turned those steady eyes on him. "Were you on duty yesterday, Officer Brennan? Did you review the incident report? Or did you decide it wasn't worth your time?" Brennan's face flushed. There was no formal complaint." "There is now." David placed the folder back under his arm. "Principal Okafor, I trust you'll handle this appropriately. If not, these documents go to the school board, the superintendent, and my attorney. In that order." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing." He turned back, his voice still calm but carrying something that made everyone in the room sit straighter. "If anyone retaliates against my son or Marcus Webb, If anyone so much as looks at his oxygen equipment wrong, we'll skip the school discipline entirely and go straight to criminal charges. Are we clear? Principal Okafor nodded quickly. Crystal clear, Mr. Chen. Jackson and the others will begin their suspension immediately. David gave one sharp nod and left, closing the door quietly behind him. The office remained silent for several long moments. Then Victoria grabbed Jackson's arm, pulling him up roughly. Come on, she snapped. We're leaving. They stormed out into the hallway, Jackson trailing behind his mother like a sullen shadow. Once they were away from the office, Victoria stopped and turned to her son. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but her eyes burned with fury. Don't worry about any of this, she hissed, straightening his collar with sharp movements. I'll fix this. You'll be back in that pool. Jackson nodded, but his eyes darted nervously toward the main entrance, where David Chen's tall figure could still be seen walking away straight-backed and purposeful, like a man who had just completed the first phase of a much larger operation. The morning sun painted long shadows across the school hallway as Kai made his way to his locker. His oxygen concentrator rolled smoothly beside him, its soft hum a constant companion. Marcus walked beside him, closer than usual, his eyes scanning the corridor like a guard. You sure you're okay being back? He asked quietly. Kai nodded, adjusting the nasal prongs behind his ears. Can't hide forever. The hallway wasn't as crowded as usual. Word of David Chen's visit to the principal's office had spread fast, and students gave Kai a wider berth than before. Some watched him with newfound curiosity. Others with obvious discomfort. He reached his locker and took a deep breath, steadying himself. The combination lock clicked familiarly under his fingers. 18-7-23. The metal door swung open with a creak. Kai froze. Oxygen masks, at least a dozen of them, spilled out of his locker. Each one was smeared with thick red paint, making them look like twisted, mocking faces. They tumbled to the floor at his feet, a grotesque pile of medical supplies turned into weapons of humiliation. A piece of paper fluttered down last, landing face up on top of the masks. Written in the same red paint, "No air for you." The hallway went silent. Then whispers started, phones came out, and Kai felt the familiar weight of being watched, recorded, turned into entertainment. Oh my God, Marcus breathed. He started gathering up the masks, trying to hide them from view. Kai's hands trembled. The oxygen flowing through his nasal prongs suddenly felt thick, insufficient. He could hear laughter, Sienna's distinctive giggle cutting through the whispers. Like our art project? Sienna called out from down the hall. She stood with two other girls, all wearing their student council pins despite being suspended. We thought you needed some spares. Shut up, Marcus snapped, still scrambling to collect the masks. Or what? Another voice joined in. Jackson appeared from around the corner, his usual smirk firmly in place. Your Special Forces daddy going to come back and try to scare us again? Kai's chest tightened. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the hallway too narrow. Every breath felt like a struggle, not because of his illness, but because of the rage building inside him. What's wrong, robot boy? Sienna pressed, stepping closer. Can't breathe? Something snapped inside Kai. All the quiet dignity he'd maintained, all the careful silence, it shattered like glass. Enough. His voice echoed off the lockers, startling everyone into silence. He turned to face his tormentors, his hands reaching for his nasal prongs. In one swift motion, he pulled them free. You want this so bad? He threw the prongs at Jackson's feet. Here. His chest burned immediately, but anger gave him strength. Take it. Is this what you need? His voice cracked but didn't weaken. Does this make you feel powerful? Picking on someone with a chronic illness because you're too pathetic to face your own problems? Jackson's smirk faltered. Students in the hallway lowered their phones, caught between shock and fascination. You think I'm ashamed of this? Kai gestured to his oxygen concentrator, to his bare equipment on the floor. I'm fighting a lung disease. What's your excuse for being a monster? Sienna took a step back, her confident pose cracking. We were just what? Kai advanced on them, his fury making them retreat. Just having fun? Just showing everyone how cruel you can be. Congratulations. You succeeded. You proved you can bully someone with a disability. Want a trophy for that? Kai, your oxygen. Marcus touched his arm, he shrugged him off. No. They want to see me struggle to breathe? Fine. Watch. He faced Jackson directly, his chest heaving with effort. This is what it feels like. Every day. Every minute. But I'm still here. Still standing. What's your superpower? Jackson's face had gone pale. Other students were backing away, but no one could look away. My dad, Kai continued, his voice quieter but strong, taught me that bullies are just cowards in disguise. Prove him wrong. Try fighting someone who can fight back. Through the windows, a tall figure caught his eye. David stood in the parking lot, perfectly still, watching. Even from this distance, his presence seemed to fill the space. Jackson followed Kai's gaze and saw David too. The blood drained from his face. He doesn't need to threaten you, Kai said, his voice dropping. He just needs to watch. Because that's what you're afraid of, isn't it? Someone seeing who you really are. Marcus held out the nasal prongs, and this time Kai took them. His hands shook as he reinserted them, but his eyes never left Jackson's face. Next time you want to mess with my oxygen, he said, drawing in a deep breath through the prongs, remember this moment. Remember that I chose to take it off. You didn't win. You never will. The bell rang, making everyone jump. Students began hurrying to class, giving the scene a wide berth. Jackson and Sienna backed away, their usual confidence shattered. As they retreated, Jackson glanced once more toward the parking lot. David hadn't moved. He stood at parade rest, his stance casual but his attention laser-focused. When Jackson met his gaze, David didn't wave or nod or make any gesture at all. He simply watched, his stillness more unnerving than any threat could be. The bullies disappeared around the corner, leaving Kai leaning against his locker, adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Marcus started cleaning up the painted masks, his movements gentle. That, he said quietly, was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Kai closed his eyes, feeling the oxygen flow through his prongs. Through the window, he knew his father was still watching, standing guard like a sentinel. The emergency meeting was called within an hour. David sat alone at one end of the conference table in Principal Okafor's office, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Across from him, Victoria Ridge perched in her chair like royalty, flanked by Officer Brennan and Coach Harrison. Principal Okafor cleared his throat. Mr. Chen, we need to discuss this morning's incident. Which part? David's voice was quiet, controlled. The vandalized locker or my son having to defend himself because no one else would? Victoria leaned forward, her designer jewelry catching the fluorescent light. Mr. Chen, these children were merely playing. Perhaps in poor taste, but playing. David placed his phone on the table, the video of the hallway confrontation already queued up. Is this what you call playing, Mrs. Ridge? The video played, showing the masks tumbling from Kai's locker. Officer Brennan shifted uncomfortably in his chair while Coach Harrison studied his hands. Teenagers can be rough sometimes, Coach Harrison offered weakly. Boys will be don't. David's single word cut through the air like a knife. Don't finish that sentence. Principal Okafor dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. Mr. Chen, we understand your concern, but, do you? Marcus's calm was unnerving. He pulled out another folder and began laying out photographs, the vandalized masks, screenshots of social media posts mocking Kai, time-stamped security footage showing Jackson and his friends near Kai's locker early that morning. This is harassment, he continued. Targeted, systematic, and documented. Victoria's perfectly maintained smile tightened. Mr. Chen, your military background might be causing you to see threats where there are only pranks. In fact, she straightened in her chair, your behavior has several parents concerned. My behavior? David raised an eyebrow. Yes. Victoria's voice dripped with false concern. Stalking the school grounds. Intimidating minors. Using psychological warfare tactics. Psychological warfare? David almost smiled. Is that what you call standing quietly in a parking lot? Officer Brennan cleared his throat. We've received complaints about you appearing suddenly near students. Following them, you mean being present at public events? Standing in plain sight? David's voice remained level. Coach Harrison jumped in, his voice strained. Jackson says you whispered threats to him. I told him I see everything he does. David's voice remained level. That's not a threat, Coach. That's a fact. Through the office window, David noticed Ms. Rivera, the art teacher, passing by. She paused briefly, making eye contact before sliding a folded note under the door and continuing down the hall. Victoria's perfectly manicured nails tapped the table. Mr. Chen, let me be clear. If you continue this aggressive behavior, we will be forced to take legal action. Legal action? David leaned back. For what exactly? Documentation? Observation? Standing still? For creating an atmosphere of fear, Victoria said. Like the atmosphere my son lives in every day? Principal Okafor raised his hands placatingly. Perhaps we could find a compromise. There is no compromise with bullies, David stated flatly. You're worried about my military background? Then you should know, I understand escalation of force. I understand proportional response. Everything I've done has been measured, legal, and in plain sight. Are you threatening us? Officer Brennan's hand drifted toward his hip. David's laugh was short and without humor. Officer, if I were threatening you, there would be no doubt. He stood slowly, gathering his documents. But since you're also concerned about my presence, let me be clear. I will continue to protect my son. I will continue to document every incident. I will continue to stand witness. Mr. Chen, Victoria started, but David held up a hand. The only choice you have, he continued, is whether you want to be on the right side of this or not. Because this ends one of two ways: either you do your jobs and protect these kids, or I make sure everyone knows exactly why you didn't. He moved toward the door, pausing to pick up Ms. Rivera's note. You can't intimidate us, Victoria called after him, but her voice wavered slightly. David turned back, his expression unchanging. Mrs. Ridge, if you think this is intimidation, you don't know me at all. This is just me paying attention. He glanced at Officer Brennan. And I suggest you start paying attention too. Because next time your officers conveniently look away while my son is being assaulted, I'll have that documented as well. Coach Harrison stood up suddenly. Now, wait just a minute. No, Coach. Waiting is over. David's hand rested on the doorknob. You've had chances to stop this. Instead, you chose sides. Remember that choice. It's going to matter soon. He stepped into the hallway, unfolding Ms. Rivera's note as he walked. Behind him, he could hear Victoria's voice rising in pitch, demanding action, protection, consequences. But David was already reading the note. I have documentation. Years of ignored complaints. When you're ready. Rivera. The empty corridor echoed with his measured footsteps as he headed toward the exit. The afternoon sun cast his shadow long against the lockers, the same lockers where his son had finally found his voice that morning. As he pushed through the heavy doors into the parking lot, David muttered under his breath, just loud enough for his own ears, you made this a battlefield. The morning air was crisp and heavy with dew as Jackson strutted across the empty school parking lot. He arrived early for swim practice, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his breath visible in the pre-dawn chill. The lot was deserted except for a few cars belonging to maintenance staff. Jackson reached for his phone, typing out a message to coordinate the day's plans. His fingers paused mid-text when he felt it. A presence, the hair on the back of his neck stood up. Good morning, Jackson. Jackson spun around, his phone clattering to the ground. David Chin stood less than 3 feet behind him, hands clasped behind his back, wearing a plain black jacket and jeans. His expression was neutral, almost pleasant, but his eyes were cold and focused. How long were you? Jackson's voice cracked. Long enough. David's voice was soft, conversational. He bent down and picked up Jackson's phone, examining the unfinished text message before holding it out. Planning your day? Jackson snatched the phone back, trying to summon his usual swagger. You can't be here. My mom said your mother said a lot of things. David took a single step forward, and Jackson instinctively stepped back. But here's what matters, I made a promise to my son. And I keep my promises. Is that supposed to scare me? Jackson's attempt at bravado was undermined by the tremor in his voice. David smiled slightly. Fear is a choice, Jackson. Right now, you're choosing to be afraid because you know what you've done. You know what you are. A car door slammed in the distance, making Jackson jump. David didn't even blink. I'm not afraid of you, Jackson insisted, but his eyes darted around, looking for witnesses, for help. Yes, you are. David's voice remained calm, almost gentle. But not because I'm threatening you. I haven't touched you. Haven't raised my voice. Haven't done anything but stand here and talk. He tilted his head slightly. So why are you shaking, Jackson? Jackson hadn't even noticed his hands were trembling until David pointed it out. He shoved them into his pockets. My mom will your mother can't protect you from the truth, David interrupted. She can't hide what you are forever. The kind of person who attacks someone with a chronic illness. Who mocks their struggle to breathe. He shook his head slowly. That truth will follow you long after high school. Long after swim seasons and scholarship offers. That's who you'll be. A group of swimmers appeared at the far end of the lot, heading toward the aquatic center. Jackson started to call out to them, but the words died in his throat when David took another calm step forward. You have a choice, David continued, his voice dropping lower. You can be the person who realized he was wrong and changed. Or you can be the coward who needed his mother to fight his battles while he tortured a disabled kid. He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes. Choose wisely. Jackson backed away, nearly tripping over his own feet. You're crazy. Everyone knows you're crazy. No, Jackson. Everyone knows I'm patient. I'm methodical. I document everything. David pulled out his phone, showing a screen full of video thumbnails. Every push. Every taunt. Every time you thought no one was watching. He pocketed the phone. I see everything. The sound of footsteps on gravel grew closer as Jackson's teammates approached. David didn't move, didn't look away from Jackson's face. They're coming, Jackson said, trying to sound threatening. You should go. Should I? David's eyebrow raised slightly. Or should I show them the videos? Let them see their captain for who he really is. Jackson's face went pale. You can't. I can do a lot of things, Jackson. Legally. Publicly. Thoroughly. David's voice hardened just slightly. The question is, what are you going to do? The teammates were almost upon them now. Jackson looked desperately between them and David, who still hadn't moved. Think about it, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Think about it every time you look at my son. Every time you consider hurting him. Remember this moment. Remember that I'm watching. And make better choices. He stepped aside just as the other swimmers arrived, greeting Jackson with shouted hellos and shoulder slaps. Yo, Jax, you okay? One of his friends asked. You look like you saw a ghost. Jackson's head snapped around, scanning the parking lot. David was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone, like he'd never been there, but Jackson could still feel those eyes on him, could still hear that calm voice promising consequences. Later that morning, Jackson burst into his mother's home office at their estate, his practice clothes still damp with pool water, his eyes wild. He was there again, Jackson's voice cracked with panic. He just appeared out of nowhere. He knows everything. He has videos. Calm down. Victoria commanded, rising from her desk. Who was where? Chen. Kai's father. Jackson paced the room, running his hands through his damp hair. He's everywhere. In the parking lot, near the locker rooms, just watching. Always watching. Stop it. Victoria grabbed his shoulders. You're letting him get in your head. That's what he wants. You don't understand.